Hey guys, Harry the Potter here. This is my very first video for YouTube. I figure for the first video, tonight I'm going to show you all how I center the clay. I didn't clean my wheel off from last time I was throwing, so get it cleaned off real quick. What I like to do when the clay is dried on here like this is instead of trying to scrape it up and possibly ruin my bat, because I'm using one of these fiber hydro bats, and they get damaged really easily. So I try not to scrape them as much as possible. So I just take some water in my sponge and just kind of rehydrate that clay a little bit. Just kind of let my sponge gently let the water absorb into the clay. Gets the clay nice and soft. And once that clay is rehydrated, then I can just gently use my soft yellow Cheryl mud tool rib here. Awesome tool, by the way. And just gently hold it on there. Scrapes it off nice and clean. And we are ready to go. And now my bat is actually perfect moisture content to throw the clay on and get started to get centered. All right, so I got my ball of clay. This is probably about, I don't know, 2.5 pounds of clay or so. Pretty standard for me. Y'all might want to start with about 1 pound or so if you're first starting off. Anyway, I get my clay relatively round. I've already gone through the wedging process to get all the air bubbles out and get the clay going in the same direction. So all the clay molecules are kind of moving in the same direction now, which makes it a lot easier when I go to center. So I'll just take my clay ball, throw it down in center. If it's not directly in center, no big deal. Instead of trying to pick it up and then throw it back down, which I might accidentally create an air pocket by doing that, I'm just going to gently kind of shift it. Try to shift it to where it's closer to center. And now I'll give it a couple pats. Now I like to pat the clay as opposed to just pressing down on the clay because it creates a little bit more friction and allows the clay to really adhere to the bat. That way it doesn't really go anywhere. I've had students of mine that have done this, and next thing you know, their whole ball of clay is flying across the room. So, you know, we want to try not to do that. Try to make sure the clay is nice and secure. Water is my best friend, so water is the lubricant that I'll use to allow the clay to move through my hands. And the way I like to center is a little different than a lot of people. Most people, you'll see, they'll kind of do this coning effect, which I do, and there's lots of times where I do that, but for beginners purposes and for teaching purposes, the best way I've found to center the clay is I'm going to take my elbow and I'm going to put it right here on the inside of my thigh. That way I've got some nice stability. I can actually use my hips to kind of move that hand in and out. And I'm going to use this portion of my hand right here gently on the side of the clay. So this is really the only part. What I want to do is keep that pinky back, almost like I'm drinking tea. So try to remember, keep that pinky back. I try not to wrap my hands around the clay. And this, again, goes kind of contrary to a lot of the way people teach. But I found that this is the best way to really control the clay and not to scoop up underneath it. So again, I'll take this left hand, brace it into my hip, gently let this hand glide. Now I'm going to take my right hand, I'm going to make a fist. I use it called the footprint part of my hand, right? And I'm going to gently set it on center so my knuckles are lined up with center. And what I do is I go through this up-down motion, I call the seesaw, right? So I'll press in with this bottom hand, clay rises up, then switch, press down with the top hand, clay flows out. So in and up, down and out, in and up, down and out. Now one of the important things about doing this is the change in pressure, right? So as I'm pressing in, I don't want to just immediately press back down because it's too much of a shift on the clay. So I press in a little bit, kind of pause for a second, rest, and then shift and press down. pause, rest, press in. So it's kind of like a seesaw, up, down. And what happens is I start out with pretty extreme motion, right? And then as I get closer and closer to center, my hands get smaller and smaller as far as the motion I'm making, till eventually I get the clay in the center. So again, up and down. Up and down. You notice how I'm keeping that hand back. This elbow is right here in this hip. Really allows me to get good control of the clay. And down. And then once I feel like it's in center, I'm going to pause where I'm at, gently take my hands away, and that is how I center the ball of clay.